So, welcome to another episode of the Trailblazers Experience podcast, sharing candid conversations with women about their amazing career journeys. My next guest is a seasoned leader. She's an expert in marketing, e commerce, and customer experience. She's grown diverse e commerce and subscription businesses and had senior roles across e commerce, digital, media, entertainment, and is now managing director for a brilliant business called Look Fabulous Forever. Hello, Janice.
Hey, Natola, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. I mean, I've been really trying to get you on this show because I think you're an amazing and formidable woman, and sharing your story, your journey is the whole purpose so we can empower someone else.
Thank you so much. I really love the podcast, and you've had some amazing women on it. So I feel really privileged to be part of that group. Thank you.
Do you know the power of digital, isn't it, Janice? Just building that community and touching someone, whether it's yourself or somebody else, I think has been great about the journey. I feel like it's an act of service. I'm learning, but also empowering knowledge through wonderful women such as yourselves.
Thank you.
So, Janice, you've had an impressive career. But let's talk about that because it's spanned diverse industries such as, Birchbox and now Look Forever. Looking back on reflection, reviewing, can you share some key moments or decisions that sort of shaped your journey to becoming the e-commerce and managing director that you are right now?
Yeah. So I think, as you said, have had a very long and very diverse career. And I think there have been a few different kind of factors that have played in. I think some of it is luck, kind of some of it is conscious decisions. And sometimes it's been a kind of positive force, as in I want to move towards X, and other times it's been the negative force, I want to move away from Y. So I think thinking about it, there are kind of three kind of really crucial pivot points in my career where my career accelerated because of decisions I made, which I think are really useful to share. The first one was real absolute luck that when I graduated from university, I went to work for Dixon's Stores Group. So at the time, Dixon's ran Dixon's, Curry's, and PC World. It was one of the biggest and most successful retailers in the UK at that time. And it was an incredibly commercial environment. Every day, every Monday, we would come in at 6:30 to prep for the trading meeting to have all of our metrics on margin and revenue and units and against forecast and all of these things. So there's a real discipline around numbers and it being expected to know your numbers and know how you're influencing your numbers, and particularly introduced me to forecasting, that we would forecast on a company level, on a product group level, on an individual line level, because you would have to manage stock and you would have this, stock turn was really important. And on one hand, if you didn't buy enough stock into the business, then you couldn't sell it. But if you had too much stock, you then didn't have the cash to buy more stock in. So it was this incredible commercial environment to work in that I then took that discipline, particularly around forecasting, into the rest of my career. Because if you say, right, what do I expect to happen and why? And this doesn't just have to be revenue. This can be, how many views do you think this video will get? And why do you think it? What are you benchmarking against? And then how did it actually perform? And why was that performance better or worse than you expected? So it's that discipline of really making you think about your assumptions and then check if they were right. And you learn every time. So I think that commercial environment, I've then taken that into the rest of my career, and it really accelerated everything I did after that. So that first step, which was real dumb luck, was really, really crucial to everything that came after.
I feel there's a lot with perseverance. When I remember my first forecasting experience and, the naivety I think that comes with it at the beginning of your career saying, we actually have to predict what we think we're going to sell and how much we need. And what if we buy too much? What if it's not enough? What if, it's too expensive? How do we negotiate? It was just mind boggling. I think for me, that was being plunged into the hot coals and just get on with it. But a bit of perseverance. But once you get into it, you sort of understand, okay, there are trends that you have to pick up on. Your best sellers are always your best sellers. There's sort of key principles that guide you throughout your career. But the beginning, that must have been really intense for you.
Definitely. And I think it also kind of immunizes you against failure to a certain extent because you're never going to get any forecast 100% right. And as long as you know why you were wrong and what you would do differently next time, then that was a valuable experience. So, and I think that kind of seeing failing isn't failure, it's just an opportunity to learn, was also a really, really valuable lesson. You can't be right. And I think naturally I'm somebody who likes to be right. So that lesson early on that that's not really important was really valuable.
Yeah, yeah. And then moving on from that, how did that, what was the progression in your career journey?
Yeah, so I think, kind of the next kind of pivotal moment is kind of fast forward a little bit further from that. And I went, to be fair, from Dixon's to go to work at News International for 6 years. And I worked for a division that produced essentially magazines and newspapers. So a whole load of different things from the Times Literary Supplement, which is the most highbrow literary publication in the world, through to a magazine for nursery school teachers. So, really diverse different products with different target audiences, different messaging. And there I was leading direct marketing, which it came with that discipline of the commercials and kind of all of those things. So, it was a natural progression. But I spent 6 years there as a direct marketing specialist. And that kind of next pivot point of my career is I knew long term, if I want to lead a marketing department, I'm going to need a broader spectrum of experience. And that wasn't available to me at News International. And, I was well paid. I was promoted a bunch of times. I knew how to do my job in my sleep, kind of all of those things. So I wasn't desperate to move, but I knew that move was going to be really, really crucial. And so the role came up at Playboy. And at that time, when I say Playboy, people think of Playboy magazine, but Playboy magazine hasn't published in the UK for decades. So at that time, Playboy was about TV. So it was TV subscriptions. So because I had this long experience in subscriptions and this very kind of commercial background, they were willing to take a risk on me to say, do you know what? You can do brand advertising and your first TV ad and booking above the line media and PR and events and photo shoots and partnerships and all of that experience that I didn't have and I couldn't get elsewhere. And I knew it was going to be really, really crucial to get that kind of job. So that's why I stayed at News International for 6 years. There's no point me moving just to do direct marketing at some other business. I've got to move into that broader spectrum of skills to be able to accelerate my career into what then became kind of the head of marketing period of my career.
So I'd say very strategic, isn't it? Because, at the time, probably direct marketing was telemarketing. Emails were not there at the time, so it was more direct selling, cold phone calls and things like that. So we know that direct marketing is now evolved into digital. So it was really strategic from you at that point. I feel there's a lesson there about going into a role and the longer you stay, thinking about what are the key things you want to achieve while you're in that role.
Absolutely. I think particularly if you're happy in your role and you're well paid and you have a great team and all of those things, there is a reason to move, but you've got to be really clear, what is that? What is it that tempts you? What is that? What causes you to have itchy feet? And then you'll know it when you see it. It's not necessarily like, oh, I need to have this exact role, but like, what does it look like? And then I think you are attuned to finding the right role.
So you move into the TV subscription world of Playboy. How was that for you?
It was a very interesting experience because there was so much in the role that I hadn't done before. My first 6 weeks in the role, every single day, I thought, "Oh my God, I'm going to get fired because I don't know what I'm doing." And I was absolutely terrified, but also weirdly exhilarated, particularly having come from a job where I could just do it without even thinking. I was massively challenged and I loved it. I loved being challenged and growing and learning new skills, and it kind of really awoke something in me. And it was really interesting because my boss at the time was an amazing man called Richard Gale, and he said to me, my first day on the job, he said, "I give you 2 years in this role. You will, over the course of 2 years, get the skills and experience you need from this role, and you will move on." And weirdly, he was right almost to the day. So, kind of, there are, let's face it, Playboy TV at the time, that it's porn. And that's not something that everyone is comfortable working with, but I knew it was going to get me the opportunities I needed. And ultimately, Playboy is an incredibly iconic brand. Whatever you think of it, it is a brand like no other, and that is a specific experience in and of itself, working for that kind of brand.
Yeah, and I was just picking up on really what your boss at the time said. I think that's a very good leadership skill to have to say, I know that there will be some people who will come and work for me, but they're only here for a short period of time, and that's okay to get the skill set that they need, provide the service to the business, and then the idea is that we want people to spread their wings. So that was actually very good of him to, you know that that was the direction of travel for you in terms of your path.
It's a great thing to have on your CV for a couple of years, but you've got to be really careful that that ends up starting to be 5, 10 years, then you will get pigeonholed.
Exciting experience, and then moving on from there.
Yeah, so one of the most random moments of serendipity in my career was that, because porn is often at the forefront of new technology, I was one of the few people in the UK at the time had experience in streaming and video on demand, because this was probably 5 or 6 years before Netflix launched in the UK.
They
So
were early
this
adopters, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. As an
very,
industry.
yeah, very, very early adopters. So I managed to get a role in the early days of film video on demand, and I went to work for a business that did both. We ran the movie service for Virgin's cable TV platform, and then we built one of the first streaming platforms in the UK and ran streaming services for the likes of Film 4 and HMV and EE and all of those things. And one of my great passions outside work is film. I am a total film geek. So the idea of the opportunity of actually going to work on film was just so exciting. And the idea that I really stood out from my CV perspective, because I actually had experience that none of the other candidates had, because I had worked in video on demand and streaming. So it it was a unique set of circumstances that gave me an incredible experience in my career. And when I joined that business, we were 7 people in the entire organization, and I was the only marketing person. And so I had the opportunity to build out my team and grow the business and work with film and go to premieres and all of these incredible experiences that I just feel, even today, I feel so lucky that I had that moment. And a very specific moment, that I made a conscious decision later on not to work in entertainment anymore. And particularly streaming now is big businesses. It's very bureaucratic. It's all of the things that are not right for me in my career. At the time, it was a scrappy startup where you can, move fast and break things.
It's so interesting. I mean, it feels like you've had the opportunity to learn and grow with a developing channel, or market or segment. And, with marketing, that's how it's just evolved from just classic direct sales and print to everything to do with digital and being at the cusp of streaming. I mean, streaming is it's a very lucrative business, isn't it, for the ones who own the streaming platforms, but the artists themselves, whether it's music or film, are probably not earning as much as they should.
Well, having worked a lot in entertainment, I think there are some really interesting stats that, for example, typically record labels lose money on 9 out of 10 artists. Tell
Mm,
me how many other businesses are willing to take that kind of risk.
risk. Yeah.
So I do, I don't suggest for a minute that, to be honest with you, unless you're, Harry Styles or Taylor Swift, you're probably not making a huge amount of money out of music. But at the same time, the record labels are using those incomes to also support artists more broadly.
Yeah, it's one of those industries where if you win big, but if you don't, then it's a losing game. Um, what what have you found? Because obviously you've worked in the entertainment industry, digital industry, and now obviously e-commerce. Where's sort of your heartstrings? Which ones pulls you then most?
Yeah, it's funny that if you'd said to me 10 years ago that A, I wouldn't work in film anymore, and B, I wouldn't want to work in film anymore, I would have been absolutely, absolutely horrified. And I think one of the things I've learned in my career is the kind of environment I excel in.
Hmm.
And I know for me, it is scale up. I don't have the patience for startup. I want you to go and get product market fit first before I want to get into that. But equally, I don't play well in a big bureaucratic business with a lot of structure. So I think for me, recognizing the kind of business I'm good at makes me naturally lean towards e-commerce for a start. And I think it was quite a difficult transition moving out of entertainment into e-com, but I think now we can see the parallels between transactional entertainment and e-commerce much more clearly, particularly with the rise of subscriptions. And you can say, well, actually, do you know what, Netflix is a subscription business, and is that different from kind of Grays or whoever you might be thinking of. So I think we see those skill sets a little bit more similarly now, but at the time, it was when I was applying for e-commerce business, they're like, but you work in entertainment.
And there's a lot to be said about that because actually, people should not be pigeonholed because you have lots of transferable skills. And I think that should be, the key factor. I tend to, out of interest, I'm always looking to see who ends up becoming C suite in organizations. And mostly, for those of you out there, if you have a finance degree, you can work anywhere and rise quickly. But mostly you see people coming from consulting firms, or finance background. But then really it's the transferable skills. What are they looking for? They're looking for attention to detail, being able to, understand strategically how to grow or scale a business, how to pivot. So there are a lot of learnings. 20 years ago, I would not have understood that. But now, actually, having been in the industry, it's really interesting. I also love the fact that you thrive on scale ups. I think I think if I look at my CV, it's been similar where startups don't interest me that much. I want you to prove, have your MVP, prove the concept, generate some revenue, and then I'll come and help you do the rest, help you grow. And then if it's already established, there's little wiggle room if it's a corporate organization, unless they're looking to change completely. But it's so hard, isn't it?
It is so hard. And I think I've ended up going into a couple of organizations where they've said, yes, we want that change. And do they
And then that's not the
actually
case.
want the
Yeah.
change? Yeah. And do they want all that comes with that change? So I think even when bigger businesses want change, it's quite hard from the outside to tell how much are they genuinely committed to going through that change.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So circling back, you ended up at Birchbox, which an amazing, probably in scale up phase when you joined.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me about that.
Yeah, so that was a really interesting moment in my career. And that was the point where I pivoted from entertainment into e commerce. And at the time, I was in a role that I was very, very unhappy in. And it meant that I was casting my net much wider in terms of the roles that I was looking at. And a role came up on my LinkedIn feed, and it was marketing manager at Birchbox. At the time, I was I'd been at head of level for about 10 years. And I loved Birchbox. As it turned out, subsequently, I discovered I'd been actually one of their earliest customers and one of their most long-standing customers. So I would love the business. I was totally miserable. I was like, this is so below my pay grade. It was also maternity cover, so it wasn't even a permanent role. But I was just like, do you know what? I love Birchbox. I'm going to throw my hat into the ring anyway. Why not? Where's the harm? So, unsurprisingly, I got a rejection email like pretty much straight away and kind of thought nothing of it. And then a couple of months later, um, Savannah Sachs, who's a UK MD, emailed me out of the blue and said, can we chat? And she said, look, the situation is we've got someone going on maternity leave and she's been with the business almost since day one. She started as an intern and she's worked her way up to kind of marketing manager. And our business is totally reliant on this one person. And she's going on maternity leave. And I just cannot find anyone with the right skill set to replace her. And Savannah said specifically, I've got loads of people who understand beauty, who understand e-commerce, but it's the subscription piece that is absolutely crucial to the success of the business. And I need someone with your depth of subscription experience. And so she ended up, we compromised that she gave me the marketing director title, which was the thing that I'd been really kind of working towards over the last few years, but I took a 20 grand cut in salary. So it was a massive cut in salary and it was a short term role. But the conversation I had with Savannah was, I genuinely think I can grow your business. I can turn it from, at that point, they were just hitting break even. I can turn it to profitability and I can grow it to the point where I justify the salary that I think I want. And within a year I managed to do that, the business was consistently very profitable. Over the 2 years I was at Birchbox, we went from they kind of plateaued around kind of 70, 80,000 subscribers for a little while before I joined. I took them to 180,000 subscribers and took them from being a kind of brand that a certain number of people have heard of to being something that everyone had heard of. So I proved myself. I got the salary bump, all of the good things, but I knew it was a brand I loved and I knew I had the skills to make a difference. So it was while it was a risk, it was a short-term risk.
But also, your negotiation skills were brilliant because it was outcome based. I think a lot of the time, women go in thinking you have to negotiate, saying, well, I deserve this salary because I've done X, Y, and Z, which is right. It's not wrong to do so. But actually, if you go in and say, well, if I can achieve this in the next, or I will achieve this in the next 6 to 12 months, then let's have it in writing that this is, actually what the next step is going to be, and then it's very clear, it's black and white, and then it's not you going in again saying, well, in my sector I believe I should earn X, Y, and Z. It's a really good strategy and a good nugget to share. And also your personal happiness is really important. you know Sometimes being in that role where you're earning as much as possible, money isn't everything, isn't it? And your role doesn't define you. You need to have a role that gives you added value, even from a personal perspective.
Absolutely.
So, if we talk about now you as a managing director, what, what, how do you thrive and how do you empower yourself? Because obviously you are now leading a team, running a business. So there's not only the monetary aspect to achieve, there's the team, but also what is the key driver for you as well?
Yeah, so I think I love my job. I really, really do. And I love so much about it. I think I've alluded to the fact that, I love that scale up. I love growing a business. So it was the perfect opportunity for me. And I think I was incredibly lucky that it is a family owned business. So our founder, Trisha Cusden, started the brand 11 years ago. She was 65 at the time. So she's 76 now, and the most incredible, inspiring women. And her two daughters, Anna and Susie. Um, Anna runs both the group that is both Look Fabulous Forever and our manufacturer, and Susie runs operations. So it's a family owned and run business, but it's a family who have been really clear about what their own skills are and where they need to bring in external expertise. And I think that's an amazing environment to be in because they respected what I could bring to the business and have allowed me to prove myself rather than kind of some. I have worked in other businesses where they're family owned and they've been quite prescriptive about what you can and you can't do. So I'm really lucky to be in that environment where I've got a lot of freedom, and as long as I can make a business case, I can do pretty much anything, which is absolutely incredible. But I think the thing for me I find most rewarding and why I have kind of pushed my career kind of in this direction is the thing that gives me most satisfaction is helping a team learn and grow and realize their potential. And so that is the thing that I enjoy most. And my preference throughout my career has always been I would rather hire at a junior level and for everyone else to shuffle up and everyone else kind
Mm.
of, to learn new skills and grow and advance than necessarily bring in senior people in the team. Now, sometimes that's unavoidable, particularly if you've got a hole at the last minute for a really crucial role, then sometimes you do have to hire in that senior person. But my preference is to kind of grow and develop the team and get them to learn new skills and try new things and grow and have that slightly scary experience I had at Playboy, that what, getting outside your comfort zone, doing things that you haven't done before has real value.
Yeah, I mean, growing teams within, that's always great, isn't it? Because it just means you can see the development. But there are also some people in teams who actually don't want to grow. They're very happy with their role and want to stay put as well. And that's okay too. You need the people who are just dedicated to their role and keep the wheels moving, so to say, within an organization. And it's really interesting to hear about throughout your journey what brings you fulfillment through all the things that you've learned. And it's like a 360, isn't it, journey, which I think we need to also bring out and empower women to understand that the job that you started 20 years ago, that might not be the job that you end up in. So I'm really talking about if you're not a doctor or a lawyer, something specialist, isn't it, where you have to be consistent to achieve the highest status. But any other career, we live in a time where creativity and digital is evolving so much. You don't know what in 10 years is going to be the next thing that will be, driving you and fulfilling you as well as a person.
Absolutely. I work in a sector, that didn't exist when I graduated from university. So you've got to be open to what changes are taking place and be curious about things. I think that's really important, even if you're not, you know, I wouldn't go out and grab a AI specialist role, but it means something like AI. I'm like, well, how are other businesses using AI, and what are they doing, and what is my team doing? Which I think is a really important question that not enough leaders today are asking. It's like, how are my team using AI? Because they are, and if you don't know, then you should find out.
Yeah, definitely. And especially from, if the biggest thing that, businesses can learn about AI is productivity and reducing admin heavy tasks, So that already is a big win in terms of the mental health of your team because they're only, focusing on what is necessary, focusing on their core skill sets and improving. But I totally agree. That is one to watch. There will be new roles, jobs created as a result of AI, artificial intelligence. So that's an exciting time to be in, isn't it, as well?
Definitely.
So you talked briefly about, being unhappy in a particular role, and that just alluded to the fact that every career has its highs and lows. Do you want to talk about, the challenges that you faced, and then maybe also talk about the rewarding moments, but challenging experiences occur everywhere and how you overcame them?
Yeah, I don't think we talk enough about this, that I have been made redundant 3 times in my career. And, I see that as something that isn't necessarily about me. It was about the business I was in and about the commercial decision they made um, at the time. But I think it's interesting, even the career things that I would count as a misstep. It's like, oh, I shouldn't have taken that role. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I've got some valuable skills out of it that then ended up in a weird way somehow being crucial later on in my career, that I've been like, actually, while I wouldn't go through that experience again, I'm glad I got that particular experience. But I think the hardest moment in my career was when I was working in streaming, that I worked for this incredible business. As I said, when I started, we were 7 people, and I built my team up from scratch. That, towards the end, I had about 10 people on my team. Um, the nature of film is, kind of pretty much every night of the week, there's a premiere, there's a screening, there's those kind of things. So we were going out socially a lot, and we would have a broader kind of team dynamic that we would socialize a lot together. So we were really very, very close knit, and I'd handpicked every single one of my team. And unfortunately, the business, just it was just as Netflix was launching in the UK, so it was just as streaming was taking off. The business was running out of money, and it ended up getting essentially sold for parts, sold for the technology, um, which is ironic because, without giving too much away, one of essentially the business was owned by 2 shareholders, and one of the shareholders about 5 years later, went on to launch a streaming platform. So the technology that they had and they sold, they then subsequently had to buy for probably somewhere in the region of 50 times more than they sold the business for. So that I'm a little bit bitter about that, as you can probably imagine. But I think that was the hardest moment of my career. Is like I was losing my job, almost all of my team and my colleagues were losing theirs as well,
Mm.
and having to recognize, as much as it felt like, I hate to use the word family, because I think that was an important lesson in my career. As much as it felt like the business was family, it's business at the end of the day. And I had to say, it's the old adage that you need to put your own oxygen mask on first before
Mhm.
you're capable of helping anyone else. And that was what I had to do through that period. And in many ways, I still regret that I wasn't able to support my team and my colleagues more through that period. And that was incredibly difficult. But I think, speaking to most people, they went through something similar at some point in their career, where they believed in something and they loved something and they worked incredibly hard, but somehow it just wasn't enough.
Yeah. And like you said, that's just, it's not a reflection on you. It's, it was a business at that time. And if they run out of cash, that is, that's just what's happened at the time. But obviously when you're working with people and their livelihoods are at stake, it's a different feeling. But we'll have to go through it once or multiple times in our lifetime to really understand what really matters. And it also humanizes, you as well as a person, Janice, because like you said, we'll have someone listening to this podcast. All they will see is what is on LinkedIn, and they'll say, "Oh my goodness, that person has had had it all, had such a great run, just jumping into the next role and being successful." But there have been moments where, you've had to pivot, and redundancy is something that at some point people have to go through. But yeah, thank you for sharing and being open about that as well. So you've obviously worked for many businesses. What would you consider significant milestones, just looking back and reflecting? And what are the moments that affirmed your passion for what you do and the impact you've had?
Yeah, I think I've definitely businesses where there've been, do you know what I mean? Certain numbers
Mm.
have significance, whether it's a revenue number or a profitability number or a subscription, kind of figure. And I think, because I come from that kind of very commercial background, there've just been so many moments of my career that probably wouldn't mean that much to anyone else, but I've been like, oh my God, we smashed that number that you thought was, at the time, you just think it's such a big target. And but I think there are lots of kind of concrete things that I look at and saying, you know what, there are things that I tell people about my career. I was like, I built one of the first streaming platforms in the UK. I organized Hugh Hefner's 80th birthday party, kind of stuff like that. People are just like, what now? How did that even happen? So I think there've been moments like that where they're quite jaw dropping to look back and say, yeah, I did that.
I mean, that is crazy. Organizing Hugh Hefner's 80th birthday party. What, here in the UK or in the US?
Yeah, he had about 20 80th birthday parties. It was the time that they were filming Girls of the Playboy Mansion, so it was also great content for
Was.
the show. So
Yeah.
yeah, there was one in London at Cafe Royal.
Oh my goodness. That was actually one of the first reality shows as well, in a way, isn't it? Because there
Yeah,
were a slew that were going on, and then sort of the Kardashians have taken over and monopolized and turned it into a big business.
indeed.
Well, that's always a good fun fact at a dinner party, Janice.
Oh, it's always, when you
Yeah.
you speak at events and they're like, "Oh, do you have a fun fact?" And it's like, "Yes, I do."
Having a high profile career is a balancing act, isn't it? With the personal life, it can be very demanding. You've talked about organizing, working in the entertainment industry, late nights, lots of planning, lots of long, hours and weekends. Because what does a healthy work-life balance mean to you? And do you have any tips of navigating this juggling act?
Yeah, I came across something recently that I found really useful, and that's Gretchen Rubin's four tendencies. And essentially, she says there are four ways that people respond to outer expectations and inner expectations. So you can respond positively or negatively to those two. For I am what she calls a questioner, which means inner expectations are really important to me. So my own expectations of myself, but outer expectations are not. So I struggle to follow rules unless I can see a good reason to do so. And I think for me, that helps organically with a work life balance because I am not someone who necessarily values external expectations of what I should do. But
Mm.
however, the expectations that I put on myself about what I want to do are really important. So I think naturally that helps me with a work life balance. And I think particularly she talks about there's a type of person called an obliger who really responds to outer expectations. That's the kind of person who tends to say yes to things that even if they don't actually want to do them. So that becomes quite a dangerous profile to be in, that you lean towards burnout. So I'm lucky that I'm a questioner. But even that can lead me into trouble. And I think for me it's about managing my energy and about understanding what things give me energy and what things take it away. And I think even when I know something energizes me, there can be a balance. So, for example, I love speaking at events, and in many ways, it energizes me, particularly on the way into it and afterwards. But on the actual day, on the way home, I'm going to be absolutely exhausted. So I think that there was a period of time a few years ago where I just started on a journey around my personal development. I just started going to the gym and I was trying to learn Japanese on top of having a very demanding role. And I just started to hit burnout. And I was like, yeah, you, as much as you want to do all of those things, you can't do all of those things. You need to pick. So I ended up dropping the Japanese and combining the personal development and the exercise to be something that I do those two things at the same time. So kind of managing my energy, I think, is really important for me, and saying, look, do you know what, you're tired, you can't take this on no matter how much you might want to do it, is really important for me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, realizing that you can't do it, you can. I think I learned a valuable lesson raising my kids and building a career. And I had to learn that there were some things I was going to have to give up to achieve the other. So if it was, missing a promotion because I just could not take on that job or that role because the priority were the kids when they were younger, or do you know what I mean? And there's always something that's got to give. Have you ever heard of the happiness quadrant? So basically, it has four dimensions and it talks about there's one sector which is about future benefit and is it meaningful to you in your life? Future detriment, then obviously it's meaningless, don't pursue it. Present benefit, because it's giving you instant gratification or pleasure. And then present detriment, you are, I don't know, working long hours and it's it's giving you lots of pain, stress, burnout. So it's putting your life into those chunks and gives you clarity in terms of what you're focusing on at that point in time as well. The four different states of mind.
Yeah, I think that that's a really useful framework, that it's just so easy for us to be like, "Oh, I want to do this and I want to do that." And when you end up doing all of those things badly, you're actually better saying, "Do you know what?" And I've been constantly surprised by timing in your career and how important that is, that sometimes one of my friends has got a saying, something like, what's meant for you won't pass you by. Just this idea that, yet maybe you can't pursue this right now, but you'd be surprised how potentially that's going to come back to you in some way, and potentially a better way at a later date.
Yeah, I believe in that, especially if you're actually working towards a goal. So there are some people who adopt the principle of what's meant for me will be, and they're just sitting around waiting. It's a bit like sitting on a road. Actually, if you'd walked 200 meters to the right, there probably was a bus station or a tube station or people to pick you up, and you're just sitting there waiting. It almost is you need to move in that direction of travel in order for it to say, hello, the opportunity is now here. And that's
Absolutely.
yeah. um it's interesting how your younger self has a different idea and core values. I think for me personally, the things I believed in when I was younger, they probably evolved over time. Talk to me about your core values and your ethics, and sort of what are the key core elements for you in your life at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my kind of core principles is kind of over promise, no, the other way around, under promise and over deliver. That's what.
Like, Janice, come on.
Yeah, try, like, I will always, kind of don't say yes unless you're sure you can do something, and kind of manage people's expectations. And it's always better to kind of deliver more than you're expecting. Say, yes, do you know what? Actually, I can do this. And while I don't manage, kind of while I don't respond well to outer expectations, it's my inner expectation. If I've told you I'm going to do something, then it's really important to me that I do it. So I think that kind of, when I say I will do something, it's really important to me that I am actually able to deliver it. So that for me is a real kind of value. And I think um, my priorities have shifted an awful lot in my career. And I think, particularly, I went through a period of my career where I got stuck. I got stuck at that kind of head of level for about 10 years, couldn't get that like director role, and I got quite frustrated. I got
Mm.
like, kind of like, what am I doing wrong, kind of, this isn't fair, kind of all of those things. And I look back now, and of course I know the answer. Now I know
Yeah.
what
In
was now I
hindsight,
know
what
what was
was it?
holding me back. And I was very lucky that somebody pointed it out to me. But the problem was, for too long in my career, I'd focused in on hard skills, and hard skills are really important. That,
Mm.
I work in a changing industry. It's really important that I know what's going on in digital marketing, what's going on in e-commerce, AI, all of these things. I need to know that, and that's really, really vital for my career. But the problem was, I didn't see the benefit of soft skills, and I didn't work in organizations that saw the benefit of soft skills. And it was only when I started focusing on my own personal development that my career accelerated. And I was very, very lucky that someone shone a light on that for me and started me on that path. So for me now, my personal development is like probably my number one priority, that I spend typically an hour every day, whether that's listening to podcasts or reading a book or doing an online course. That is my commitment to my own personal growth.
Yeah, I mean, hard skills obviously are the things that are measurable, isn't it? It's the numbers, it's the targets, and you think, oh, if I do all of those, tick all those boxes in my checklist, next step in my career. And have you ever heard of, hidden PR? So your soft skills are the hidden PR, how you communicate with others, how you interact, how you mentor, how did people find you at a networking event or a dinner party, or are you funny? Do you have a sense of humor? Or there's something human about you. And I think those are the things we don't learn in formal training or education. It's in the hard knock school of life. That's where you learn that. And to your point, you have to take the time to develop those skills by stepping out of reading, learning, listening, interacting, seeking advice, asking questions if you don't know.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I was really very lucky that so it was my boss at Birchbox Savannah Sachs, and she said to me one day, "You need to work on your communication skills." And I was outraged by this. I mean, you can tell I'm comparatively articulate. I'm quite comfortable speaking. I trained as a copywriter, so I can write well. And I was like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. I am an excellent communicator. And of course, I started digging into it because, I respected her and she told me that for a reason. And I realized, oh no, I'm great at broadcast. But ultimately, communication has nothing to do with your intention. It is only measured in your impact. And
Mm,
only the person you're communicating with can measure your impact. And that was a
exactly.
total light bulb moment of me. I was like, oh, I've been doing this all wrong. No wonder I was never getting promoted. Nobody wanted to work with me.
They weren't receiving what you were transmitting, basically.
Indeed, indeed.
Oh, that's amazing. Let's talk about industry evolution. The landscape of where you're working, whether it's marketing, e-commerce, subscription, has evolved so much. How do you stay adaptive and innovative in an industry that's constantly changing? And what do you think are the future trends, things that are going to interest you in the future? I know we've talked about AI, but what interests you? What's piquing your interest at the moment?
Yeah, so I think the primary thing is curiosity. You've got to be interested. You've got to be, kind of reading and going to events, and you've got to have that huh moment. That I remember there was a time in my career where the growth of our business was slightly stuck, and I knew that I needed a particular type of technology which didn't exist at the time. And there was an article I read where somebody had developed something that was adjacent to what I needed. And I picked up the phone to them and I said, look, hey, you're doing this. Would you be able to take that and do something slightly different with it? And they were like, do you know what? We might do. Let me go away, find out. And turns out they could. And that thing that we brought into business, we then saw
Mhm.
really, really rapid growth because I knew what I was looking for. It's like you were talking about earlier about knowing what you want from your career and like seeking out that opportunity. I think having that kind of a radar of what's going on is really crucial. If you understand your business and you know what the problems are, you're kind of, it's like when you test drive a particular car and then you suddenly see them everywhere. It's that
Mm,
awareness of what your problem is and kind of seeing it. And for me, you know, events and podcasts and my incredible network, just listening to other people's stories and what are they doing and what we're all facing some variants on the same challenges. How are other people, kind of tackling them? And it's not necessarily like, oh, I'm going to take that exact thing and use it, which let's face it, I've been at events where I'm like, do you know what? We can do exactly that and we should start doing it tomorrow. But sometimes it's the, oh, that, but with something else blended
mm,
in and it inspires something. So kind of really being um, exposed to that. And I think, like, particularly for me right now, the whole landscape of how we do marketing is just in the last year has changed radically, and it's going to change even more in the next year or so, particularly with cookie deprecation. So it is just the most exciting environment right now, and I'm fascinated to hear particularly there seem to be two kinds of e-commerce businesses right now. They're the ones who are really growing and really doing well, and the ones who are struggling. And it's really interesting to hear the different approaches that those businesses are taking and learning from them.
It's a bit, if you had those metrics that worked, once again, the key measurables, now having to educate, teams and C-suite about that is proving challenging in itself.
Absolutely. It's a really interesting time. And I think, ironically, it's actually good for businesses to be questioning the metrics that they were measuring previously and how useful they are. And I think, particularly without getting too technical, I've always favored a more full funnel approach to growing a business, kind of looking at, you have to take people on a journey to know what your brand is and, kind of what your products are and all of those things before you can convert them. Last click attribution has never really valued that model, whereas actually, for example, because we follow that strategy, it'll look fabulous forever. And while we have a long journey to purchase because we're convincing customers to buy from us, once we've got them over that hurdle, they then go on to be incredibly loyal because it's not just a transaction. We've spent time building trust, providing them with useful and helpful content. Then that pays back longer term with more loyalty. Whereas in a very kind of universal analytics, last click background, you tended to undervalue that long term nature of that relationship building.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, everyone always ignores the awareness, interest, and decision before the decision phase, but they're very great insights that can be taken there, and understanding how is the customer actually interacting with your brand, your product, what is it actually telling you, or your service, if it's a service industry that you're in. So I think there's still a lot to come. So juicy, a great time to be in digital e-commerce and so on. We've talked about a lot of things, Janice, and you've had an amazing career journey. I mean, even yourself reflecting, you should actually pat yourself on the back as well for all the things you've achieved, even with the highs and lows. If you were to circle back and offer trailblazer tips, to some young lady or older lady out there who's stuck and just needs a bit of direction, what would it be?
Yeah, so I think my key tips would be, number one, it's a weird thing to say. I think my career is a bingo card, that you're collecting these seemingly random skills and experiences, but collect enough of them, and they're going to come together in some unique way that's going to position you perfectly for an opportunity where you're going to stand out beyond any candidate. So collect those diverse skills and experiences. And I think, be really clear about what you need from your career, but don't be too prescriptive, because those opportunities will come to you if you're looking for them, but allow a little bit of serendipity. So don't make the brief too tight. And I think the final thing would be, don't be afraid to take what might seem like a step down or a step back if you're taking it for good reason, that often your career will accelerate because you're getting yourself out of a kind of dead end into a situation where you're moving again. So yeah, don't it doesn't have to be linear.
Janice, this has been amazing, really great, and just getting to know you, the person. And I am certain you will inspire some woman out there. I think, there is no age limit to when you can start a business or become an entrepreneur or start your career or pivot or change. But if we can provide those tips to, those coming out of high school, secondary school, A levels and university, something they can just say, right, I'm going to take this with me along the way, then awesome. Great job. Thank you so much, Janice.
Thank you, Natola.
This has been the Trailblazers Experience podcast. Do me a favor, tell another woman about the podcast, and see you next time.